What if I told you the real reason you can't quit your fifth workday isn't your bank balance? It's a number you've literally never calculated.
2 months ago, a woman named Priya opened her bank app for the first time in years without dread, not because she'd gotten a raise.
Not because she'd paid off debt.
She opened it because a stranger on a podcast asked her one question she couldn't shake. How much does staying employed 5 days a week actually cost you to maintain?
She assumed the answer would sting. She didn't expect the answer to basically be nothing. Priya is 33.
She brings home $58,000 a year. She's not rich, and she's not drowning. She's the exact kind of person the standard work calendar was built around.
Reliable enough to never miss a Monday, tired enough to never ask why Monday has to happen 5 times.
When she finally sat with the actual math, she found she'd been donating an entire extra day every week not to survive, but because no one had ever shown her what to subtract.
That's what this video is really about. Not the vague, how do I escape my job, content that goes nowhere.
The sharper question. What dollar figure is silently chaining you to a 5-day calendar? Because the second you know that number, the decision becomes yours.
And for most people, that number turns out to be embarrassingly small. I'm the voice behind Novira Invests, and I spend my time here taking apart financial truths of people never examine.
This might be the costliest one you've never questioned. If this is your first time here, stick around. It gets a little uncomfortable before it gets useful.
Here's the standard case, and it's not crazy. Priya earns $58,000 after tax withholding that lands near $42,000 take home about $3,500 monthly.
Rent eats $150. Food, utilities, transit, insurance, another $300. That's $2,450 committed before the month even begins, leaving roughly $1,050 of slack.
That slack is the reason the arrangement feels fine. It's stable. It's predictable. Nobody's choosing between rent and groceries here.
So most people stop right there, build a cushion, trim a subscription, call it solved.
But almost every budgeting framework treats the work week itself as fixed, like gravity, and treats everything else as the thing you tweak around it.
That's the blind spot, not because the arithmetic is wrong, because it's incomplete. Your schedule isn't a constraint.
It's a line item. It just never gets written down. So let's write it down.
Government labor data consistently shows that costs tied directly to in-person, full-time work, commuting, professional clothing, weekday meals away from home, cluster in a predictable band.
For the average office employee, that band sits between roughly $380 and $580 a month. These aren't theoretical numbers.
There are specific habits nobody questions. The parking permit, $95 a month, paid without thought for 3 straight years, because when you're required on-site 5 days a week, it isn't optional.
The presentable wardrobe, roughly $55 monthly in dry cleaning, replacements, and the emergency blazer bought the night before a client call.
Weekday lunches. Priya buys lunch 4 days a week because her 40-minute break sits her in the middle of a food court she didn't choose. Average ticket, $14. That's $224 a month against maybe $45 if she ate from her own kitchen. And $179 monthly gap created entirely by geography and the clock.
The gym she's barely used in 4 months, $40 a month, kept alive by guilt and the fantasy that she'll go after a 9-hour shift.
She won't. Exhausted people don't go lift things. They collapse onto a couch and order delivery. That membership isn't fitness spending its attacks on burnout.
Added together, $95, $55, $179, $40, that's $369 a month that exists purely because of a 5-day in-office schedule.
Rounded up conservatively to $450 to cover the smaller leaks, extra coffee runs, car wear from the commute, the impulse buys that fill the cracks of an overpacked week.
$450 a month, $400 a year.
a cost that never shows up on any spreadsheet because nobody thought to go looking for it.
Strip that out of Priya's monthly essentials and her real cost of living drops from $2,450 to roughly $2,000, about $24,000 a year.
Not $42,000.24. That's the actual number she has to clear. Now the obvious pushback, health coverage.
Drop below full-time and most employer plans vanish. Priya priced this out. A marketplace plan for someone her age and income runs $220 to $280 monthly.
She added $250 to her stripped budget. New floor, $250. If Priya worked 3 days instead of 5, 60% of her current hours, her gross income becomes about $34,800 a year.
After tax, that's close to $150 a month. So here's the gap, $250 needed, $150 coming in. A shortfall of $100 a month.
Not a second career, not a leap of faith. $100, one tutoring session, one freelance edit, one consulting call she fully controls.
This is usually where people interrupt with the real objections. What about savings? What about an emergency fund? What about retirement?
Fair questions. They deserve real answers, not dismissal. A 3-day salary alone won't build serious long-term wealth. Priya knows that.
But these objections all assume the 5-day week is the only lever for building a cushion. It isn't.
One freelance client at $450 a month is $400 a year, generated from a 4th day she chooses rather than surrenders.
Combine that with her stripped budget surplus, and she's now actively directing roughly $700 a year, not just reacting to a paycheck.
The goal was never a free 3rd day off. The goal was discovering the real number was smaller than the one trapping her.
Priya's number is hers, yours will look different, but the framework scales upward, not downward, because the hidden schedule, dependent spending tends to grow with income, not shrink.
Higher salaries usually mean pricier wardrobes, longer commutes, costlier neighborhoods near the office.
So the gap between what you earn and what you actually need often widens as pay increases.
Someone earning $75,000 isn't further from a shorter week than Priya. They're frequently closer because their invisible layer of spending is even thicker.
So why does almost nobody run this number? Here's where it stops being about spreadsheets.
Behavioral researchers have spent decades studying something called anchoring. Once a figure becomes your reference point, your brain quietly treats it as the floor, not the ceiling.
Your salary becomes the minimum you believe you can survive on, regardless of what your stripped expenses actually require.
And every raise doesn't loosen that anchor, it drags it higher.
Spending creeps upward to match, and the real gap between earning and needing disappears, not because your needs grew, but because nobody ever interrogated them.
There's a second, quieter force at work too. The anchor says you can't afford less. A separate pressure says you shouldn't even want less.
A full 5-day commitment reads as seriousness, as belonging, as participation in what everyone around you has already agreed to.
It's not just a schedule, it's identity. When Priya mentioned cutting back to a colleague, the first response wasn't how. It was, wait, are you okay?
Built into that reaction is the assumption that working less signals something broken, rather than something calculated.
That assumption is so common, most people swallow it as a financial fact instead of naming it for what it is, choosing approval over recovered time.
Two forces, same direction. Your brain insists you can't afford it. Your environment insists you shouldn't want it.
So the math never even gets attempted. Priya didn't have a spending problem. She had a missing subtraction.
Had she run this audit at 28 and shifted to a shorter week with one side income stream, she'd have reclaimed roughly 100 hours by now, 2 recovered days weekly, multiplied across
Nearly 4 years.
But even a conservative $10 of value per recovered hour, one tutoring gig, one freelance task, that's over $31,000 of value generated while everyone else sat in traffic on a random Tuesday.
That figure ignores compounding, ignores new skills built, ignores actual rest. It's the floor.
Push that to $25 an hour, typical for a single part-time consulting arrangement, and 100 hours becomes roughly $77,500.
More than Priya's entire annual salary. Sitting inside hours she was handing away to a schedule she never once questioned.
The real cost of overworking isn't only what you overspend. It's the time you never reclaim, the alternatives you never price out, and a calculation nobody ever showed you how to run.
You now have a number, the exact figure your stripped real expenses require.
Strip away the phantom costs, strip away the spending your schedule quietly manufactures, and what's left is your true floor.
If your current income already clears that floor, and for most working adults past 30, it does, then those extra hours aren't paying for survival.
They're paying for 2 anchors you never agreed to carry. The question was never whether a shorter week is affordable.
It's whether you've actually done the math to find out. Priya hadn't. Most people watching this haven't either.
That's not carelessness. It's just a subtraction nobody ever taught you to make. If this stirred something loose for you, the next move is running this same audit on your own numbers.
I've put together a free breakdown of the 5 hidden costs quietly draining most people's accounts, links below.
And if you want the full framework for rebuilding your budget around what you actually need instead of what your paycheck conditioned you to expect, that deeper resource is linked too.
Before you go, if this was useful, hit like and consider sticking around here at Novira Invests, because we run audits like this every week.
One last thing, drop your number in the comments. What's the smallest income you think could actually cover your real, stripped-down life?
I read everyone, the 5-day week was never a law, it's just a default. Defaults survive not because they're optimal, but because nobody ever ran the alternative.
Priya finally did. So, in the last 15 minutes, so did you.